Huh. Oh, that would do it. Hello, it's been a while. Once again, I'm bad at making videos. Today we're going to be making probably the easiest way that I've ever seen to make tongs. I figured this would be great for learners to begin, rather than forging out, from a piece of 5/8 bar, which is pretty thick. And that's pretty sizable, especially if you're just getting started and you don't have the techniques or the muscle memory down to hammer that out. So this is a good way to do this. I was shown this by Andy from Dirty Tools. I'm going to put a link for his shop. He lives in Washington. His shop is in Washington. He makes fantastic tongs. What he uses is 1/2-inch spring steel. I think it's 1040, something similar to that. So it's not very high carbon, but it's enough to give it a good enough spring. I bought several of his tongs. Here's one pair. They are very comfortable. They're strong. Like I said, they're springy enough that I can grab a thick piece of steel. It's the wrong size of steel, but I can grip, and you can see the spring, and grip it pretty hard. So they're very comfortable, very ergonomic. I've got these. I've got a pair of scrolling tongs. I've got one more pair, but they're fantastic tongs. Definitely go check out his stuff. Go buy some of his tongs. They're $30, $40 a piece, and they're well worth it if you consider the amount of time that you would spend making your own. They're very comfortable and good quality. But this is how he does. I'm going to show how he does it. I'm starting off here with about 17 inches of steel each. The ends down here I'm going to cut off. They're a little bit messed up, but we're just going to start off with the jaw end. And then we're going to go down to the reins. Alright, so first things first, I'm going to cut off, tip off this that I don't want. It's too flat for what I need. And right on my foot. Do that for both of them. Breaks off just right, easy. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do, we're going to head right into marking out how we want this, how long we want these. These are about the same length. We want a certain amount for the bolster, for the hinge plate rather, standing on the hot piece of steel, felt good. We want about 2 inches for the head, 2.5 inches, on about 1.5 to 2 inches for the hinges, and then the rest will be the reins. I'll use a chisel, grab my hammer. It doesn't have to be exact, just got to make sure that they are the same length, so I'm going to make sure that they are the same length here. So I'm going to go with close to 3 inches. Now those marks are exactly side by side. I'm going to do that again, right there. So there are 2 marks there and there, and that's what we're going to use to make the jaws and the hinges. So what we're going to do now is we're going to find those marks, and we're going to put the back mark down here. We're going to drop that down. We're going to hit right there on the second mark, so it kind of brings this back up, and that, bring that down till it's an appropriate angle, about what you want. Kind of do the same thing, straighten that out, drop that down, and you're looking for probably a little less than a 45-degree angle. But you want to make sure that this is parallel with this. They're not quite parallel, it's because it's bent back here. And just going to straighten that out. So So that's about the same as what he's got there. And we're gonna just do the same thing, set this aside. We're gonna use that as a template for the second one right now. So once again, we're gonna find that back mark, put it to the corner, find the second mark, hit that second mark, straighten that out. Make sure they're parallel. Hit that first one. Not quite, so the front needs to drop down just a little bit more. That's relatively close. Just gotta straighten that out a little bit. Alright, so now we've got that done. The next step, we're gonna start that the jaw right now. Now, one way you might do it is start that, the hinge plate, but if you do that right now, it might end up making it harder to do this if this is thinner and slightly weaker, easier to bend when it's hot. So we're gonna start on the jaw right now. Now, one alternative method of bending the tongs so that they are they've got that shape, bending that, is to use a bending jig. One that's a little bit larger than this. This is meant to go in the vise. There's some that are meant to go in the hardy hole in the anvil. Andy has a jig that he uses that he showed us when he demonstrated that just really makes it real easy. But basically what you do is you put that in there and you twist, then you come over here and you twist again. And it makes it pretty easy, and you can make nice easy bends with that. I just don't have one that's large enough to for 1/2 inch stock. Keep in mind they only need to put in the fire what you're going to be heating and hitting. The rest of this was getting hot, so I cooled that down. I'm keeping this well out of the fire, that way it doesn't get too hot to hold, and they won't bend and distort when I'm trying to forge that front. So here are 3 different tongs in his style. These 2 are ones I bought. This is one that I made myself. This is for 1 inch square. And you can see that they're all pretty similar, but the difference is mostly in the heads. And this is where, at this point in the forging, is where you can make all the difference with the tongs you make. See, for this is for pretty wide stock. So these are wider apart. These are further apart, and thus the angle is steeper. This is a little more shallow angle because it's thinner. These reins are closer together. And at this point, you can make this into whatever shape you want, basically. You can make this into some scrolling tongs. You can make this into some wide, almost wolf jaw tongs. You can make them into this style tongs. But it's all at this point that you can change what tongs, what size you want to make this for. So for this, I am going to make them into some tongs that will hold about 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches round. These will go up to you know, 1.5 inches. I need something a little bit smaller, and these won't quite do what I need them to do. All right, so one way I'm going to differ from the way that he does it is that I'm going to put a little bit more of a bend right in there, so that it gives it gives a little bit of room back here. So from there, what we're going to do is we're going to flatten this out, actually. Just going to bring this a little bit cold. We don't want to make it too thin, but we want to make it wide enough that it has good enough friction to make a good grip. Now, one limiting factor in making this style of tongs is the stock size. It's only 1/2 inch, so you can't make something that's super wide and it's going to have a whole lot of grip to it. But you can make something that grips very well, even despite that. This is the other one I already started on. We're just gonna clean that up. Alright, the next step we're gonna do is we're gonna put a V in there. So we're gonna come in with a dull chisel and pound a right angle into that. The way that Andy does his is he gets the tongs and he cuts into them. He makes it cut, and you know that's pretty good. But you can't get much wider than, you know, the 1/2 inch. And if you want to make it a little wider, that's why I'm doing the way I'm doing. I'm spreading out the steel and I'm folding it back around in order to you know, get more friction on it. Now I seem to have lost my fuller, so what I'm going to use instead is just going to start it off with the peen of my hammer. Then we're going to grab this piece of square stock here. And use that as the fuller. Now it doesn't have to be perfect right here and now. You can adjust this when you're, you know, fitting them all together, but the closer it is to right angle, the better. The closer it is to the center, the better. So that's pretty much done. I'm going to set that aside so we can use that as a template, and we're going to use the other, we'll get to the other one here. Once again, starting off with the peen. And then grabbing this here. Try to make sure that the diamond is pointing straight down. That was a little bit crooked. So we're good. Alright, that's pretty good there. So, those are looking pretty close together. That's basically how it's going to look. Not very pretty right now, but it'll take a little bit of adjustment. We're going to put a little bit more of a curve in there after we get it a little bit closer to what we want. A little hummingbird there. A few of them flying around. Their wings move so fast. Looking at me. Alright, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to make the hinge plate, the place where it's going to hinge. There's a couple of different ways you could do this. First of all, this is what he does, is he uses a set hammer. And this one is about inch and a half, inch and a quarter. Use a set hammer and set it down. Alternatively, if you don't have one of these, a lot of people don't, is you can use some flat bar. This here is inch and a half by 3/8. And what you could do is you could just set that on your anvil. You can get your piece and you can just hammer down right on there. And that's a pretty good option too. I'm going to do it both ways just to show that you can do it. I think the best method of doing it this way would be to have a piece that's a 1/4 inch thick, because then you don't have any worries of forging it too thin. That's one thing you don't want when doing this. You don't want this to go too thin. But I'm just going to be careful to make sure that I'm not going so that the sides end up dropping to the anvil, because then it'll be about 1/8 of an inch thick, which we don't want. So I'm going to start off with this method, and I'm going to go right between those marks as evenly as I can get. They're about a 1/4 inch off either side. I'm going to try to keep that plate from bouncing too far. Pretty loud. If fell out, but that's okay. I got to reheat it anyway, but you can see how that's going. That's about 3/8 of an inch thick right now, or 5/16. It's got a little bit of a twist in it, and I'm going to try to take that out next heat. So the next method we're going to use is the set hammer. We're going to set that aside. We don't want this end to be touching the anvil, because that's going to distort it. And we want to make sure that we're pounding on the same side. If we have them on two different sides, then that's going to cause an issue. So, right like that. You have a lot of control this way. You can get a striker if you need one. But, you know, that's a viable use too. So I'm going to finish both of these up using both the different methods. Wow, that hurts even through earplugs. So both methods work. As you can see, the one I did with the set hammer turned out a lot nicer. It turned out wider, which I like. I personally like it better. You have more control over it. Now they're not completely even, as you can see. Just some distortion from the heat. But thing is, what you want is that bolster, or that hinge. You want that to be about the same thickness when put together as the reins themselves. So, but before we go into that, we are going to work on the reins and get those where we want them before we punch the holes and you know, pin them together. So I appear to be out of fuel, so we're going to try to do this quickly. So what we are going to do here is for the hand end, we're going to go about there. Just flatten it out. Not flat, just give it a little bit of shaping. We're going to do the same thing up here. We're going to do that for both of them. And at that point, you're just going to drill the hole, because I don't have gas, and then we're going to pin them together. Why? Why does this suck so much? Alright, so what we're going to do here, just so that they're exactly the same, I put them together where I believe that they'll line up perfectly as I can get, and I'm just going to drill from the one into the other if they would cooperate. And it won't. Ooh. There we go. It's a good thing to know how to sharpen drill bits. Okay, so the plan is here. We got our holes drilled. We're just gonna bring them over here together. We got this 1/4 inch piece. The pin is about 1 inch long and 5/8 thick. That's gonna go through. Ball peen hammer. Gonna hit it flat a couple of times, get that set, turn it over, do it on the other side, and then we're gonna round it out with the ball peen side. Alright, so it's basically all cut all the way through. It's a little bit tight. Got that. Push the other side. Not my proudest pin, but it'll work. Loosening that up a bit. Prefer to do this hot. You can see they're a bit ugly right now, but when you adjust them, clamp them all together, use the vise, they'll be a lot better. Trying to use desperately what little I have left of my fuel. Try to finish these out. There's a will, there's a way, right? So now these will fit the size that I want pretty well. So they're not perfect. Ultimately, I'd like to, heat these up and adjust them a little bit more. But that's basically what you can do. You can fiddle with this as long as you want, and try to get them perfect. But this is basically the gist of what you want. Back here it's comfortable, and it's comfortable to hold. It doesn't have sharp edges like a lot of square ones, and you can adjust these however you want. You can bend these out so that you have they're a little closer together. You can bend this in. You can do all kinds of stuff with this. But this is basically how Andy does it. This is how he showed me to do it. This is obviously not the same exact way, but it's basically the easiest way you can make tongs. And they're not perfect. If you're a beginner, hey, these are a hell of a lot better than the first pair of tongs I made. The first pair of tongs I made they're in the trash. But as a beginner, that's pretty good. This only took about an hour, a little less than an hour. I think 55 minutes, and that's with recording, with setting up the camera. So it didn't take very long. It is a lot less labor intensive than trying to draw out freaking 5/8 square. The difference is incredible. There's no huge amount of drawing out. There's not a lot of special tools involved. You can do this several different ways. You can cut into it, like I said. That's the way Andy does it. You can do it the way I did. If you didn't have a V block, what you can do is you can use the corner of the anvil with the cross peen hammer. Just set it in there like that. But there's a lot of different ways you could do this. To get to the scrolling tongs, what you do instead of forging out these, the jaws, all you need to do is just draw these out into a taper right after you bend the angles. It's very simple, it's very easy to do. I really recommend anyone who's a beginner who needs to make tongs for a special project rather than forging out a big piece. It'd be a lot better to make them this way. A lot of ways you can modify it. It's a lot less labor intensive. You don't have to spend as much time waiting to do your project because you need a pair of tongs. Just get some 1/2-inch square. It's easy to get. Throw these together and there you go. But really, I would hardly recommend checking out Andy himself. Quick and Dirty Tools. He makes awesome tongs. Like I said, I really love his tongs. I buy them because one, I don't necessarily want to take the time to make them, and two, because I want to support a fellow blacksmith. And tongs are one of those things that you basically will always need. And he's got so many different types. He's got ones for blade making, he's got stuff for flat bar, he's got ones for all manner and sizes of stock. He's got ones for holding pipe even. So really check him out. Thanks for watching. I hope that I was able to help some people out, help people save some time and some energy doing it this way rather than a way that's harder. I've not seen this way on YouTube before, so if this helps, let me know. I appreciate all your comments that you guys make, and I will talk to you guys later. He calls himself Quick and Dirty Tools. These are his, these are mine. My gosh, mine are ugly. Oh, these are 1 1/4 inch. Oops.